They found the tape inside a small radio station that hadn't broadcast in over 30 years. The building was half collapsed, its walls softened by humidity and vines, the letters FM Esperanza 88.4 still faintly visible on the cracked facade. It was in the province of Misiones, a place where the jungle grew over everything, including memory. The reel sat in a dusted console, half-threaded, half-spun, its label almost erased. 13 de Julio, 1977, Noche. The electricity was long gone, yet when the engineer from Buenos Aires turned the spool by hand, the tape resisted, tight, tense, like something was holding it in place. He forced it free and heard the faintest sound, like a whisper pressed between layers of oxide. He rewound the tape, played it. What followed would eventually be catalogued under Case 4117B, Anomalous Acoustic Residue. The recording begins normally. A woman's voice, clear, calm, the kind of warmth that belonged to radio before it learned to sell anything. Buenas noches, Misiones. You are listening to La Hora del Silencio. The tone was soft, measured, echoing faintly in a small studio. The sound of rain filled the background, gentle and unbroken. There's the faint crackle of a cigarette, the creak of a chair. She continues, tonight's guest is Señor Avelino Duarte, caretaker of the old hydroelectric plant. Then, a pause. You can hear the man's breathing, faint and irregular, before he says, almost apologetic, I shouldn't talk about it. About what? She asks. The room, he answers. The rain grows louder. Then, static. For 2 minutes, there's only the hiss of white noise. But if you listen closely, the interference forms a pattern. A low, repeating tone. 3 pulses. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. At minute 4, the static cuts. The woman's voice returns, but it's different. Softer, slower, her rhythm off, like she's listening to something we can't hear. Avelino, the sound you mentioned, is it still there? He doesn't answer. The microphone picks up a faint vibration, almost like wind passing through metal. Then, very quietly, a new sound emerges. Someone humming. It's not either of them. The pitch is low, almost inhuman, a deep resonance that fills the space between their words. The woman whispers, "Who's there?" Silence. The hum continues. Then, the unmistakable click of the reel ending. The tape has reached its end, but the sound doesn't stop. The hum keeps going. The recorder continues running even though there's no tape left to record on. The meters stay alive, responding to something no longer there. The rest of the reel is impossible. For 6 minutes, it captures sound without magnetic material, a voice speaking from beyond the physical limit of the medium itself. Don't rewind, it says. It remembers. The final second is a tone so low it almost drops out of hearing range. Then, a breath and silence. The engineer stopped the player, stunned. The reel was empty, physically blank, no oxide burn, no residual imprint. Yet the sound had been there. He replayed it. This time, it ended differently. At the point where the voice should have said, "It remembers," the tape emitted a pulse of sound that no human throat could produce. It vibrated the console, the walls, the glass. It left an imprint on the recording head, a perfect circular burn, as though the machine itself had been branded. He sealed the reel and sent it to Buenos Aires. That was the last known copy of tape number 13, the one that kept recording after it ended. The reel arrived in Buenos Aires, wrapped in paper and fear. The customs label read, Audio Registro, Misiones Análisis Técnico. No sender's name, no return address. Only a small mark in the corner of the envelope, a hand-drawn spiral. It was delivered to the Instituto Nacional de Telecomunicaciones on a humid morning in August 1977. The building smelled of dust and old metal, its walls lined with reels that whispered when the air moved. The technician assigned to the analysis was Julian Varela, 26 years old, a recent graduate in acoustical engineering. He had a habit of listening too closely to things most people ignored. The drone of transformers, the murmur of long wires, the way silence never stayed truly still. He received the package, unwrapped the paper carefully, and read the single line written on the cardboard box. "Don't rewind," he smiled. He thought it was a joke. That afternoon, he loaded the reel onto a Revox A77, checked the spools, and began playback. The opening seconds matched the transcript the field engineer had provided. Rain, a woman's voice, the creak of a chair. Everything was ordinary in the way certain things are only ordinary before they begin to remember themselves. At minute 3, the signal began to waver. Static filled the speakers like a slow inhale. The rain thickened, as if falling inside the room instead of outside. Then the tone appeared, low, slow, circular. Julian adjusted the equalizer, filtering the lower frequencies. The waveform pulsed at exact intervals. 3, 2, 3. He frowned. It was too perfect to be environmental noise. He leaned closer. The speakers exhaled. A faint hum began to move around him. Not in stereo, not even in air, but inside the walls. Julian froze. He checked the wires. No interference, no power fluctuation. Yet the oscillation continued, growing tighter, forming a pattern that looked almost symmetrical on the oscilloscope. He turned off the recorder. The sound didn't stop. It was faint, but it was there, vibrating through the desk, through his fingertips, through his pulse. Then, from the speakers, came a voice. Soft, uncertain, human. Is someone listening? Julian's hand hovered over the switch. The voice repeated, exactly the same, but delayed by 2 seconds. Then again, layered, overlapping with itself until it formed a chorus of echoes, each slightly slower, each one decaying into static. He exhaled without realizing he'd been holding his breath. The air in the room grew dense, pressing inward. He tried to stop the playback, but the reels kept spinning, even though the machine was off. The VU meters glowed faintly. Then another sound, the faint rhythm of breathing, deep and slow, perfectly in sync with his own. He stepped back. The chair behind him moved. He wasn't sitting in it. The voice returned, softer now, closer. Don't rewind. The reels stopped. The room fell completely silent. He waited. Then, the click. The tape began to spin backward on its own. The sound reversed, but it wasn't the same. The voice was clearer now, more deliberate, every word aligned perfectly between layers of static. You shouldn't have played it again. Julian unplugged the recorder, but the reels kept turning, slow and steady, feeding the blank section of the tape through the empty machine. The speaker emitted a low hum. He stepped closer. The sound changed with his movement, following him, pulsing softly like breath through metal. Then came the final phrase. Clear, cold, spoken by a voice that was no longer human. It's recording now. The hum cut off. The reel stopped. The power in the entire building failed for 11 minutes. When lights returned, the tape was gone. The spools were empty, smooth, their oxide completely stripped, as if the sound had eaten itself. Later that night, security guards reported hearing faint voices coming from the vents. They said it sounded like radio static forming words that wouldn't finish. Julian didn't sleep. He wrote only one line in his notebook before burning it the next morning. It's not sound. It's memory trying to stay alive. For 3 days after the incident, the institute was silent. Not officially. The machine still ran. The reels still spun. But no one spoke. They avoided the room where Julian had worked. Avoided even looking at the closed door, where a faint humming could still be heard if you stood close enough. On the 4th morning, the director of the facility, Enguerrand Roberto Dalmas, ordered the power to that entire wing disconnected. They sealed the room and stored the stripped reels in a vault with a label. Anomalous. Case 417B. No one touched them again. At least, not officially. 2 months later, Dalmas found Julian in his office long after midnight, the vault door open, his face pale under the red emergency lights. He was playing something. Not the tape. The reels were still sealed. But a new recording, made on a blank cassette. It was filled with silence. Yet when Dalmas entered the room, the silence changed. The speakers released a soft hiss, followed by the faint click of a microphone being switched on. Then came a voice. Julian's own. Testing, 1, 2. He froze. He hadn't said those words. Not tonight. Testing. The voice came again. Identical. It remembers. Dalmas shouted at him to stop the tape. Julian did, but the sound continued. The reels on the deck were motionless, yet the air still vibrated. What is this? Dalmas demanded. Julian turned slowly, his eyes unfocused. It's not playback. It's the leftover. The what? The sound that stays when the sound ends. Then, through the speakers, both men heard breathing. Slow, ragged, impossibly close, as though someone were standing between them. The microphone wasn't plugged in. The console's meters began to move on their own. The needles trembled, rising and falling in perfect sync with that invisible breath. And then, faintly, the sound formed words. "Do you hear me now?" Dalmas stumbled backward. Julian only watched. The voice continued, calm, patient. "You left it running." The lights flickered. For a split second, the glass of the observation window reflected 3 figures instead of 2, one standing directly behind Julian. When Dalmas blinked, it was gone. The sound cut off. The entire room went dead silent, the kind of silence that feels like pressure. The director pulled the power cord from the wall. The meters still glowed faintly for another 10 seconds, powered by nothing, before fading one by one. Julian didn't speak again that night. He sat motionless until dawn, staring at the empty reels. When security arrived the next morning, they found the door open, the desk cleared, the equipment dismantled. Julian was gone. The only thing left on the table was a note written in pencil, trembling and faint. "The tape isn't recording what we say. It's recording that we said it." Below the note, someone, maybe him, maybe not, had drawn a spiral identical to the one on the original package. The following week, employees reported strange feedback during their broadcasts. Voices faintly overlapping transmissions, repeating words seconds after they were spoken. The director ordered all microphones replaced. The echoes continued. One night, a technician swore he heard his own voice coming from the speaker before he spoke. The next morning, he quit. Dalmas had the vault welded shut. Still, the hum persisted. Faint, almost sympathetic, like an old frequency that refused to die. When he finally resigned in early 1978, he left a final memo to the Ministry of Telecommunications. It was short. "Sound doesn't end when silence begins. It waits." And at the bottom of the page, written in a different pen, perhaps by someone else entirely, was another sentence. "And it has learned to listen back." By 1978, the institute had changed names. Centro Nacional de Audio y Transmisión Experimental, a rebranding effort meant to erase the embarrassment of Case 417B. But erasing sound is harder than burning paper. The moment silence was imposed, the echoes simply moved somewhere else. New staff arrived, unaware of the prior incidents. One of them was Lucia Morel, a sound archivist with a calm disposition and a habit of speaking softly, as if everything she said were meant for a microphone. Her task was simple: digitize old reels before humidity erased them forever. The first box she opened had no catalog number, only that same small spiral drawn in graphite on the inside of the lid. She smiled at the strange symbol, thinking it a doodle from some long-gone technician. Inside were 3 reels. The first 2 were labeled. The third was not. Its surface shimmered faintly under light, as though something beneath the oxide shifted. She placed it on the playback deck. The machine refused to start. The motor clicked, stopped, clicked again, like it was breathing. She adjusted the tension manually. The reels began to turn. Static filled the room. Not noise, but presence. The thick, full-bodied silence that feels alive, waiting. Then came faint sound. A hum, low, circular. Lucia leaned in. At first it was indistinct, a vibration too smooth to be human. Then, faintly, words began to take shape. Distorted, distant, male. "Can you hear us now?" She froze. The voice sounded as if it were speaking from underwater, muffled but deliberate. She checked the logbook. The tape's label field was blank. No recording date, no origin. The hum deepened. Her headphones began to tremble. Then, faintly, beneath the voice, she heard breathing. Multiple layers of it. Dozens, maybe hundreds of faint breaths overlapping in rhythm, like a crowd inhaling and exhaling in unison. She felt lightheaded. The air seemed to thicken. Then the voices began again. Not one, but many, whispering through each other, forming phrases that overlapped like echoes chasing themselves. "You're in the room. Beneath the room. Where it started." Her finger hovered over the stop button. Before she could press it, the sound cut abruptly. Silence. For 2 full minutes. Nothing. Then, the unmistakable sound of tape reaching its end. Click. But the reels didn't stop. They kept turning. Her stomach tightened. The motion was wrong. Too smooth. Too steady. The spools rotated with mechanical perfection, even though no motor noise could be heard. The meters on the console came alive again. They registered signal. A soft voice whispered through the static, this time unmistakably hers. Testing. 1, 2. Her hands went cold. The recording she was hearing hadn't happened. Not yet. Testing. The voice repeated. Slower. Lower. It remembers. The word echoed, fading, returning. Remembers. 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 Then faintly, a sound behind her. The room had a window overlooking the storage hall, its glass covered in dust. As she turned toward it, her own reflection seemed delayed. Half a second late, moving just out of sync. The lights flickered. When they stabilized, the reflection was gone. Only the empty room stared back through the glass. The reels stopped at last, spinning down with a soft metallic sigh. Lucia removed her headphones. The air was thick, wet, metallic. When she reached for the stop switch, she noticed something burned into the console surface. Faint but visible, a perfect circle, about the size of a real spindle. She touched it. It was warm. That night, she took the tape home. She told no one. But neighbors later reported hearing faint static from her apartment after midnight, like a radio tuned between stations. And beneath it, a woman's voice whispering slowly, as if reading her own thoughts out loud. Don't rewind. It's still recording. The next morning, her apartment was empty. Only the reel remained on the table. The tape had unspooled itself completely, wrapping across the floor in perfect spirals. At the center, pressed into the wood, was the same burned circle, warm to the touch. 2 days after Lucia disappeared, the night guard at the archive, Raul Paredes, filed an incident report that no one wanted to read. It began simply enough, the usual bureaucratic formality. But by the third paragraph, his handwriting changed, as if he'd started shaking while writing. He claimed that at approximately 2:17 a.m., the tape room lights turned on by themselves. The building was empty. The security circuit showed no breach, no movement. Yet the monitors in the guard booth began picking up an electrical hum, registering power consumption in a circuit that had been disconnected since the room's ceiling 2 years earlier. He went to check. He described opening the door and seeing the old playback console active, the same one from case 4117B. The reels were turning slowly, the same rhythmic motion reported before, perfectly steady, no motor sound, no power supply. But this time, there was no tape. The spindles were empty, rotating in silence. Then, a faint sound filled the room. Not static, not music, breathing. Soft, even, human. Raul said he thought it was his own until he realized it was out of sync. When he inhaled, the sound exhaled. He stood frozen, staring at the console. The VU meters were alive, moving gently, marking rhythm where there was no input. He approached the microphone, the one Lucia had used. Its red light was on. "Who's there?" he whispered. The meters jumped. Then came the voice. "You keep opening it." Raul stepped back. The voice was female, but older, slower, as though speaking through layers of distance. "Who are you?" he asked. The answer came through both speakers simultaneously, creating a vibration in the air that made the glass of the observation window quiver. "Playback never stops." Raul ran. When the morning staff arrived, they found him unconscious in the hallway, clutching his flashlight, his pulse rapid but steady. The console inside was off again, cold to the touch. The report never made it past internal circulation. The director ordered the room permanently sealed and filled with cement. But 3 nights later, workers pouring the final layer complained of hearing a low hum through the concrete. One swore he felt the vibration in his ribs. They finished the job and left. By the next week, the building was shut down entirely. In the years that followed, pieces of the original recording began resurfacing in strange places. Faint bleed-throughs during radio transmissions, brief bursts of reversed voices on police channels, fragments of sentences no one remembered speaking. At first, engineers blamed interference from old AM towers or atmospheric anomalies. But soon, the anomalies became selective. They didn't appear on random frequencies. They appeared on ones that hadn't been used since 1977, the year of the recording. Whenever anyone tried to play the frequency back, the same tone returned. 3 pulses, pause, 2, pause, 3. Radio hosts in Misiones began referring to it as La Frecuencia Fantasma. In 1983, during a routine broadcast of Radio Nacional Posadas, the phenomenon occurred live. Listeners across the province heard a short interruption in their signal, a blank gap, followed by what sounded like tape hiss. Then, for exactly 22 seconds, a woman's voice spoke through the static. "You never stopped listening." The anchor froze on air. The sound engineers cut transmission immediately. But on the archived master tape of that night's show, something even stranger appeared. At the end of the reel, after the cutoff, the recording kept going. No one had pressed record. For 3 minutes, the tape captured sound from a room no one was in. The low hum of an empty space, the faint tick of a console cooling down, and then, very softly, a human breath. When the engineers slowed it down to half speed, the breath turned into speech. "We're still here." The tape was locked away. But by then, it didn't matter, because the pattern had already spread, not by transmission, not by sound waves, but through the very act of listening. Every person who heard it carried its rhythm forward, unconsciously repeating it in sighs, in sleep, in the quiet between sentences. 3, 2, 3. Breath, pause, breath. And somewhere between the inhale and the exhale, something old and patient was still recording. By 1985, La Frecuencia Fantasma had become urban folklore. Truck drivers said they heard it on long routes through Corrientes, a faint hum leaking between radio stations, rising only when the road dipped into valleys. Ham radio operators collected fragments of the broadcast, claiming that when layered together, the tones formed something like a melody. A retired radio technician from Buenos Aires, Eduardo Paniagua, tried to disprove the myth. He built a closed-loop receiver capable of isolating frequency drift and distortion. The test was meant to last 2 minutes. It ran for 6. The receiver picked up nothing at first, only static. Then, faintly, a woman's voice emerged, filtered through distortion but still distinctly human. "Do you remember the room?" Paniagua thought it was an intercepted signal, a local transmission. He noted the time and frequency, 88.4 MHz, the same as FM Esperanza, the station that had closed in 1977. He logged it and continued listening. The voice came again, softer this time, closer. "You left the tape running." Then silence. He rewound the cassette. The sound didn't play back. The tape was blank. But the counter had advanced. 6 minutes of recording time used. Paniagua replayed it again, slower. Static filled the room, punctuated by faint rhythmic pulses. 3, 2, 3. Then, unmistakably, the sound of breathing. When he filtered the frequency through a spectrogram, the waveform formed a spiral, identical to the mark that had appeared on every previous reel. He printed the image. As it developed in the darkroom, the lines seemed to shift slightly, curling inward, as though drawing breath. The next morning, he played the tape again. This time, the sound began before he pressed play. It came from the speakers, quiet at first, then rising in volume until his instruments registered signal input without any source. He unplugged everything. The hum continued. "Playback never stops," the voice said, calm and low. Paniagua left the room. Neighbors later reported hearing muffled radio static for hours after he was gone, voices speaking in half sentences, as if mid-conversation. When investigators entered, all they found was the tape deck, still running with no reels attached. The spindle marks on the table formed a perfect circle burned into the wood. The air in the room smelled faintly of ozone and something else. Warm, magnetic tape. In 1988, recordings of the phenomenon began surfacing in Chile, Uruguay, and southern Brazil. Each version carried the same characteristics: faint static, soft breathing, and a single phrase, whispered near the end. It's still recording. Researchers from the University of Rosario tried to locate the origin of these leaks. They triangulated multiple reports, comparing them to existing broadcast infrastructure. Their conclusion was impossible. The source wasn't moving. It wasn't transmitted through towers or relays. It was coming from the ground, specifically from a geological fault line beneath the Paraná Basin. When they placed seismic microphones there, the data showed an exact harmonic pattern, 3.2.3, repeating endlessly like the Earth itself was exhaling in rhythm with the recordings. One student described it best in his field notes. "It's as if the planet remembers the sound we made when we first learned to listen." But the last entry in that notebook was written in shaking ink. We played the frequency through the speakers. The floor started breathing. Weeks later, the entire research group resigned. The audio files vanished from university archives. Yet in the years that followed, something strange began to happen in homes across Misiones. Old cassette players, the kind left in drawers for decades, began to turn on by themselves during storms. The spools rotated, the air hummed, and somewhere within that faint static, people swore they heard their own voices whispering, delayed by a few seconds, softly repeating the same words over and over again. Don't rewind. It's still recording. By the early 1990s, most of the people who had worked at FM Esperanza were gone. Some retired, some vanished, some refusing to speak about what happened that night in 1977. But the recordings had not died. They had only learned to wait. It began again in 1992. A group of students from the University of Buenos Aires was digitizing old analog tapes for a thesis on forgotten Argentine broadcasts. One of them, Mariano Funes, came across a reel labeled simply Test Broadcast, July 1977. He threaded it onto a reel-to-reel player, pressed play, and leaned back with a cup of mate. For the first 40 seconds, nothing but static. Then, a faint voice. Buenas noches, Misiones. You are listening to... He smiled. It was ordinary, nostalgic even, the tone of a vanished era. Then he heard breathing, not the natural inhale of a host between words. Something else. Something too slow, too deliberate. Tonight's guest. The voice wavered, slowed, dissolved into distortion, then silence. Mariano checked the machine. The reels were still turning. He let it play. At the 2-minute mark, a low frequency began to emerge. A pulse that shook the air but didn't register on the VU meters. It repeated in a pattern. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3. He turned off the machine. The sound continued. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, and froze. The tape reels had stopped, but they were still moving. The spools rotated without tape, the metal hubs spinning on empty air. A whisper filled the room. You came back. He thought it came from the speakers, but when he turned, the sound was behind him. The reel deck clicked. The reels reversed. The voice spoke again, slower now, almost a sigh. Don't rewind. He unplugged the machine. The reels kept turning, slow, steady. He ran. When the other students returned the next morning, they found the tape deck cold, the reels still, and Mariano's recorder sitting beside it. The tape inside had melted, fused to the plastic. When the audio was recovered weeks later, the engineers found something impossible. The last 6 minutes of the recording contained a second layer of sound, an inverted copy of the original broadcast, played backward, yet still synchronized in time. When both layers were combined and slowed down to half speed, they formed a coherent phrase. The recording never ended. The waveform pattern, when printed, was the same spiral seen on every prior reel. And embedded within that spiral, visible only through deep spectrographic imaging, were 2 words written in faint harmonic lines. Listen again. That same month, technicians at Radio Nacional Buenos Aires noticed interference during a midnight broadcast. At first, they thought it was cross-frequency bleed. But when they isolated the distortion, they realized the interference wasn't being received. It was being transmitted from inside their own studio. The equipment logs showed that their main microphone had powered on by itself at exactly hour point 17, the same time the frequency surge had appeared in Misiones 15 years earlier. The interference lasted 47 seconds. When analyzed, the waveform was identical to the 1977 recording, but there was a difference. The new file contained a third layer, a live one. Someone speaking in the present tense, faint but audible. It's not a transmission anymore. It's a return. The station shut down for the night. The next morning, every reel in the archive had unspooled across the floor in perfect concentric circles. No one could explain it. The technicians destroyed the tapes. But that night, the sound returned through the building's ventilation, a faint hum that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the static. The janitor described it best in his report. It wasn't loud, but it was alive. It sounded like the room was listening to itself. And beneath that hum, faintly, came a whisper, so soft it might have been imagined. It's still recording. By the late 1990s, La Frecuencia Fantasma had crossed from folklore into anomaly. It had become something halfway between science and prayer, a sound that only revealed itself to those who already knew its rhythm. The government had stopped investigating years ago. Universities refused to publish papers about it. Yet the pattern persisted, resurfacing in frequencies that no longer existed, leaking through machines that weren't even connected to power. And then came Project Umbral. In 1998, a small team of researchers from Cordoba, physicists, sound engineers, and one priest, attempted to reproduce the original 1977 recording using controlled electromagnetic fields. They believed the voice phenomena were not supernatural, but residual imprints, magnetic ghosts created by stress in analog materials. They were wrong. The first phase of the experiment involved a sealed acoustic chamber with a reel-to-reel deck and a constant low-voltage feed to simulate aging static. For the first 6 hours, nothing. Then, at 2:13 a.m., the recorder powered on by itself. The team, startled, watched as the reels began spinning, pulling blank tape through the machine. No one had touched it. The speakers emitted low static, followed by a pulse. 3, 2, 3. Every instrument registered sound, but no source could be traced. The frequency hovered at 12 hertz, below the range of human hearing. Then, faintly, a voice emerged. "You built the room again." The priest crossed himself. "It's mimicry," he said. "Residual playback." But the voice continued, shifting timbre. Female now, clear, layered, overlapping itself like an echo inside an echo. "We never stopped recording." The lights flickered. The air pressure in the room dropped. The technician monitoring the spectrogram stared at his screen. The waveform wasn't linear. It was recursive, looping into itself, forming a spiral. He whispered, "It's writing." When they slowed the playback to 1/4 speed, the spectrogram displayed text encoded in harmonic interference. It wasn't random. 3 words. "Open the door." The priest refused to stay. The rest continued. They were scientists. They wanted data, not mythology. At 02:34, one of the microphones began to vibrate violently, the stand rattling as though struck by invisible hands. The tape reel glowed faintly orange. Then the hum changed, not mechanical, not electrical, organic. It pulsed in rhythm with human breath. "Who's breathing?" someone asked. No one answered, because all of them were holding their breath. The sound came again, louder this time, resonating through their bones. "We are." Then the walls began to move. At first it seemed like vibration, but the movement was coordinated, expanding and contracting in slow, steady rhythm, as though the entire room had lungs. The priest screamed prayers until the sound swallowed his voice. The recording equipment captured everything until the tape ran out. But the tape didn't end. It kept spinning, the reels rotating endlessly, the hum deepening until it fell below measurable frequency. When the team finally broke the door down at dawn, the room was empty. The reels had stopped. The tape was blank. No bodies, no notes, no heat signatures. Only the faint smell of ozone and melted plastic. And etched into the concrete wall near the console, a burned spiral. Precise, smooth, identical to the one from 1977. The single word beneath it looked handwritten, scrawled in black soot. "Listen." In the months that followed, similar phenomena appeared in isolated incidents. A power plant in Tucumán reported faint voices over their frequency monitors. A border radio in Paraguay picked up static that formed phrases in reversed Spanish. A ship at sea caught interference that whispered coordinates leading nowhere. Each case involved the same harmonic pattern. Each case ended with silence that lasted exactly 47 seconds. And in each silence, if you listened carefully enough, you could still hear it. The faint hum of breath trying to become sound. It was no longer a transmission. It had become a pulse. By the time Project Umbral was erased from official records, the sound had already begun to travel without machines. People who had never owned a radio described hearing faint playback loops in the stillness between rain and thunder, as though the air itself carried an unfinished sentence. It began with short bursts, rhythmic pulses barely audible, always following the same sequence. 3, 2, 3, like a living code that refused to die. Those who investigated it called it the inhale. Those who feared it simply called it la voz. In 2001, a sound archivist in Mendoza named Tomas Invernon received a batch of broken cassettes from a defunct local station. The labels were mostly illegible, but one had survived, scrawled in fading ink. La Hora del Silencio, Julio, 1977. The date made him pause. He'd heard the stories. Everyone in the field had. He didn't believe them. He repaired the cassette, rewound it carefully, and pressed play. Static. Rain. A woman's voice. Buenas noches, misiones. His breath caught. The voice was pristine. Too pristine for a recording over 2 decades old. It felt new, present. He checked the machine. Everything was functioning normally. Then, faintly, underneath the broadcast, came the unmistakable sound of breathing. Slow, rhythmic. At first he thought it was feedback, but the pulse matched his own. Then it changed. It began leading his breath. 3 inhalations, 2 exhalations, 3 again. He removed his headphones. The sound was still there. Not in the room, but inside him, resonating behind his ribs. He pressed stop. The cassette continued to spin. The speakers clicked. A soft voice, female but distorted, whispered, "We told you not to rewind." He froze. The words were in his native accent. Then, impossibly, the voice spoke again, matching his rhythm of breath perfectly. "You're recording now." The air pressure shifted. The room grew warm. The light bulb flickered. He reached for the power switch, but before he touched it, the deck stopped by itself. The reels reversed. A tone filled the room, low and resonant, strong enough to make the floorboards tremble. And beneath it, quieter, clearer now, another voice joined in, his own. "It's not outside. It's inside the silence." Then the hum ended, abruptly, leaving behind an aftertone so deep it wasn't heard, but felt. When the power returned, the machine had recorded 6 minutes of signal after the cassette had fully rewound. Spectral analysis showed something impossible. 2 separate recordings layered together, one moving forward, the other backward, forming a symmetrical spiral pattern. When the data was mapped sonically, it resembled breathing. Tomas burned the cassette. That night, neighbors reported hearing the faint crackle of static from his apartment. No radio, no power, just a steady pulse. He was never seen again. By 2003, paranormal groups online had begun collecting versions of the tape. Some played only static, others played full conversations between people who had never existed. Yet across every version, the same final line appeared, always in the same soft voice. "Don't rewind, it's still recording." One version, allegedly recovered from a basement in Rosario, included something new, a final 30 seconds of silence. When the waveform was expanded, faint, slow vibrations appeared, too low to hear. When amplified 1000%, the data revealed a heartbeat. Then 3 words. "Keep listening." And then a sound, not a click, not static, but a slow, soft inhale. After that, the waveform continued blank for 8 more seconds before ending. But technicians noticed something chilling when they closed the file. The waveform didn't stop at 0. It extended faintly beyond the data limit, as if the sound were still being written. When the computer was unplugged, the fan continued spinning for 12 more minutes. The room smelled faintly of ozone and iron oxide. The screen stayed black, and from somewhere within the machine, or maybe beneath it, came a low, quiet voice. "Playback never stops. We are what remembers." By 2012, the legend had drifted out of Argentina entirely. People stopped calling it La Frecuencia Fantasma. It became something smaller, quieter, the kind of rumor whispered on online forums at 3 in the morning. Half belief, half confession. They called it The Loop. Every copy of the original recording had been destroyed decades earlier, and yet it kept reappearing, in field recordings, in background noise, in the pauses of silence between spoken words on live radio. Sometimes it appeared in private spaces too. A man in Cordoba claimed his newborn hummed in her sleep. 3 slow tones, then 2, then 3 again. A musician in Chile recorded an empty studio and heard his own piano playing a melody he'd never composed. A journalist in Mexico City received an email containing an MP3 file with no metadata, only 47 seconds of faint static and the words almost inaudible, "You're inside it now." The file had no origin, no sender. When analyzed, its waveform was identical to the earliest known recording from Misiones, 1977. Every iteration carried one impossible property. It changed subtly each time it was played. The more you listened, the longer it lasted. And then, one day, it stopped circulating. In 2019, a young audio preservationist named Luciano Armas was restoring damaged reels from a defunct community station in the northern province of Formosa. At the bottom of a box marked 1970-1980, he found a small cardboard sleeve, completely blank except for a faint spiral drawn in pencil. He hesitated, then loaded it into the deck. The tape began to spin. Static. Rain. A woman's voice. "Buenas noches, Misiones. You are listening to La Hora del Silencio." Luciano froze. He knew that name. He knew the story. He smiled nervously, half expecting it to be a prank. Then the tone came. 3, 2, 3. The meters on the console rose and fell perfectly in rhythm. Then came the whisper. "Don't rewind." Luciano stopped the machine, but the sound continued. Not from the speakers, but from inside the room. "It remembers." He turned off the power. The reels kept moving. The whisper became breathing, slow, deep. He stepped back. The air temperature dropped sharply. The desk began to vibrate, soft and steady. Then, the hum, a low, physical sound, like air passing through lungs the size of a building. The lights dimmed. Luciano's breath caught. And then, from within the static, a voice unlike any other, layered, calm, endless. "We are the space between sound and silence. We never stopped listening." The tape snapped. Silence. Then, one last sound. A single exhale. Faint. Almost gentle. "It's your turn." When his colleagues entered the studio the next morning, the machine was still running. The reels were empty, but the recording deck had captured something. 47 seconds of silence. Then faintly, the sound of breathing. Not one person, but many, layered atop one another, perfectly synchronized. Each breath followed the same rhythm. 3, 2, 3. When slowed down, the waveform revealed faint modulations, forming words almost too fragile to read. The tape kept recording, and it always will. The file was archived, marked unverified. But when technicians uploaded it to the national database, the audio length extended itself by 12 seconds. No one noticed until weeks later, when the system logs began to fill with repeated entries. Each one a playback request. Each from a user that didn't exist. Playback requested, 03:12 a.m. Playback requested, 03:12 a.m. Playback requested, 03:12 a.m. Over and over. At that exact time, every night, the servers emitted a soft electrical hum, pulsing 3, 2, 3. They still do. And if you listen closely enough, right now in the spaces between sounds, you might hear it too. Not a warning, not a ghost, just memory, trying not to end, because even when the tape runs out, it keeps recording.